in as we come. Hopefully I have everyone now. All right. Now I got one more, two more coming in. We will admit these folks as well. And I think, let me see if I can adjust some settings here.
Oh, yeah.
Good morning, Adam.
Hi, Adam.
Good morning.
Huh?
Okay. Yeah, I'm not in a place I can turn my video on quite yet. I'll do that in a minute. But we'll see who all is on here. I know we had a few of the students on. I'm not in the same location as them. We've already reached the end of finals week, so the students may be anywhere right now. It's always hard to predict that. But I see the Wedgefield Plantation HOA folks. How are you all doing this morning?
Oh, it's starting?
It's getting ready to start.
Okay.
Was that, let's see, Marilyn, can you hear us?
Yeah, I'm here. Stan Earnhardt is here, and if you want to introduce yourself. Cindy Frog. Peggy Phil.
Okay, excellent. And this, these folks constitute the board?
Well,
Is that the
Two
case?
of us are on the board.
Yeah,
Stan and
these
myself.
are all active residents.
Yes, active committee members, active residents.
Okay, excellent. And just had another person join. Let's see. I see several other folks: T. Doran, M. Meltzy, Dow, Chris, Hank, Adam. Adam, how are you this morning?
Good. How's it going?
Good, good. Adam, of course, being one of the main people we had talked to along the way. Let's see, we have Vince joining us also. So it looks like people are still rolling in. Lauren Ames just joined. She's one of our students. All right. And, well, we're already at 9:03. We'll probably still have some more people joining along the way. Marilyn,
Yes.
I think I want to ask you the best direction to take. Obviously, the students already did their presentation, so I don't know how many in the group saw that. So do you want us to like go through anything, or do you want to just start straight into questions, or what do you think would be most productive?
What do you think, Stan? Should we just go into questions?
I feel as though we saw the presentation. When the presentation was done, we had some lingering questions. So maybe we should pick it up from after the presentation.
Right,
and go into Marilyn's questions, because they pretty much encompass everything else I've seen here. We have several pages of resident questions, but they're all pretty much headed in the same direction.
And the report that we got yesterday, your final report, we did send that out to the community, and we only sent it out yesterday, so I'm not sure how many people had the opportunity to go through it, but some, you can tell by the questions, some did. So, yeah, if we want to start, do you have the list of questions in front of you, of the questions that I said previously?
I don't have them in front of me yet.
We can start with those. Now, some of them may have been answered in the presentation. And if you could kind of reference us to where that would be in the presentation, or in the final report.
Okay. So I'm going to turn to the students then and ask them to just sort of be looking through your report and your presentation slides. And if you can find any particular locations, you know, as we're talking, you know, kind of be prepared to go to the next question and see what we can do, see what light we can shed on the situation. Yeah, I'm about a minute away from being in front of the questions, but does anyone have those
I
pulled
can
up?
read you the first question if you want to check this. The first
Hey,
question
Marilyn.
is.
Yeah, sorry about that. We
That's
do have the
okay.
question in front of us. Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry.
All right.
that's good.
At least the
Lauren,
ones that you sent us that email with, we have those. So, okay.
Okay, if you want to start with those.
Yeah, we can just run through them and kind of let you know what our answers were, or if we couldn't get to them, like what our reasoning was, and what the next steps would be to kind of answer those questions,
Yes,
if that sounds good.
Yes, thank you.
And then David, Quinn, and Emma, if y'all have any inputs as well. So, the first question was about the sediment from stormwater runoff, and can the canals have enough sediment that they can no longer handle stormwater drainage, and like how long would it take before you need to dredge again? So, how long? A lot of that. So there's a section in our report. I believe it's section 6, which is future work. So a lot of the questions that were posed involve kind of sediment transport. So that's sediment transport is just what it sounds like. It's just the modeling of how sediment moves in water environments, and that's what like all of the canals, when it's like, so how long would it take the sediment to get in there? How long would it take before it builds up? How does it move? Like all those types of things. That would be sediment transport modeling, which we are not able to do at this time, because to do that, you would need measurements of sediment over an extended period of time. So like you would want to be measuring ideally like where your pipes are going into the canals and how much sediment is coming out of those. So like measuring the catchments there, and then also having measurements coming into the canals. And you would want to take those for like a period of time so that you can create a model. But even then, sediment transport modeling is still not a super well defined or like finalized procedure. Like there's no great model yet that like engineers and scientists have thought of yet that is able to, you can't like just put in measurements like you can with flow to kind of see how much flow is going in. So that was very long-winded. I apologize for that. Basically anything with sediment, you need measurements over a long period of time, which we unfortunately were not able to do. So that question, we wouldn't be able to tell how long it's going to be without taking those long-term measurements. And David, Quinn, Emma, if y'all have anything as well.
So,
I would just say that I agree with everything Lauren said, and pretty much any justification we'll have for like the sediment in the canals is going to be based on the neighborhoods or communities around you guys, and it's not going to be based on like actual, data, because that's what we don't have. Because she mentioned it takes a while, but
so the last part of the question, if navigation weren't a factor, would dredging still, or maybe you can't really answer this for sure, would dredging still be necessary to maintain drainage?
So eventually, following just kind of like common sense, eventually the canals should get to a point where the sediment builds up enough that you can't drain them anymore. But I don't know how long that would take. And it's kind of at a point where if you want to just let it completely fill up, what you would have to do is reroute all your pipes to exit somewhere else. So you would have to just like kind of send it out to the canal a different, or not the canal, the river a different way. But to say definitively, I don't think we can say definitively that dredging would still be necessary without navigation. Like if navigation weren't a factor, but we can't say definitively, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
But I'm 10 minutes away from the HR office. I had an early meeting, so I'm sorry. So we have certain areas in the neighborhood that have stormwater, or basically like tidal water, can back up against some of the pipes. And this is not necessarily right at the canal, but it's in other areas, and there isn't an area on the canal. But I'm not asking specifically about this. But the idea that we could use or put some sort of backflow prevention, like a flap, those, I think it's a common sense question, but I do want to ask it to you. Like, if we decided we wanted to put in some sort of backflow flap, it would be important to make sure you know, there would be some sort of, we need to safeguard that from sedimentation, right? Because eventually that flap would be inundated or maybe receive pressure from the outside that would keep them from flapping open, right? Which would contain your stormwater. Right now we have tidal waters that'll back up into some of the stormwater drains. And we know that the tide will go out eventually, and then you can release that water. But it is, in your opinion, would be important for us to make sure that those flaps, if we ever went to that as the solution, they would need to be maintained and free of sediment, right?
Yeah, Adam, can you clarify where you're thinking of putting something like that?
You guys didn't really look. It was close to when we were at the intersection by the duck pond. Vince and I have been looking at this area, but then also on the other side of the neighborhood near Ricefield, I've gotten some words and some reports that the water actually, at super high tide, the water actually flows back up through the storm drain. And so that was the one thing we talked about, was you put some sort of flat to keep the backflow of water.
Will it ever like touch somewhere every once in a while so it doesn't go away? Did it go away already?
Hello?
Oh, sorry, we missed, or I think someone was saying something in the background there. But yeah, any comments that you guys have on backflow? Did we look into that very much? David, Emma, Quinn?
I know that we originally thought about implementing something like that for the outflow pipes in the canals, but I think we kind of moved away from that just because it would be hard to like implement something that was like automatic or something that didn't need to be like manually opened. And then like having something that was like, say, like operated by some sort of like sensor or like a timing something like that just introduces more like maintenance and stuff like that. Like it wasn't really like a practical like solution that we came up with, but we didn't really consider it as part of like the other parts of the property, like Adam just said, like the stormwater grates and stuff like that. Like we didn't really like think about it for those portions of the property, just the like the canals.
Yeah, I think the short story there is there are places where people have done put in those kinds of backflow preventers, but it is going to take maintenance. So long-term maintenance would be a key thing to factor in.
Gotcha.
All right. Let's see. Do we want to move to the next question or follow up further on this? Lauren, do you have question number 2 in front of you?
Yeah, sorry, I thought I heard someone in there. Yeah, we can just move to question 2 as well. So that one was, what is a greater contributor of the silt buildup in the canals, the tidal actions from the Black River, so like tides bringing in the sediment, or stormwater runoff from the plantation? So, so do they leave deposits that get, so do they leave deposits behind that later get deposited back into the canals? That is kind of the same one as question 1, where sediment transport, we wouldn't be able to tell that without long-term measurements. So there is sediment definitely coming in from the drainage, but knowing which one is more impactful would involve like taking measurements from the catchment and the like front of the canal to see what's introducing more sediment.
Yeah. I think it is safe to say it's coming from both places, but quantifying it is the difficult part.
Can I ask for clarification on that? Our contract for dredging is for 40,000 or more than 40,000 cubic yards of sediment. If there were 40,000 or even 20,000 cubic yards of sediment that had washed in from the plantation, wouldn't there be some evidence that that soil was missing?
I see what you're saying. I think not all, a majority of it is probably coming from the tidal deposits, but there's no way to like tell definitively. And we also noticed that a lot of the flow that's coming in specifically to the canals is actually coming from Mansfield Plantation. A lot of Mansfield Plantation and like that swampy area actually flows into the canals. So you wouldn't see that on your property if there has been like significant removal of sediment from above. Yeah, so here's all that purple above, that's all flowing into the canals. So that area could be contributing additional sediment load that you're not seeing on your property, but you would have to speak with Mansfield and maybe see if they have noticed anything or along those lines.
So real quick, let's walk through this. The canals are right here, right? Or
Yes.
am I missing them? Is this a canal like where the laser pointer is, Lauren?
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 4 or so. And then we're talking about this big area, not just the HOA itself, but Mansfield to the left. So this is the watershed delineation. Now, again, we're not saying that it is even a majority coming from this land. Like, it could still be a majority of the sediment coming from, you know, the coast side coming in. But there is a good bit of land that could be contributed.
Something to add, if I can. And just to make one point real fast, like when you guys came in, you know, we didn't try to handcuff you to studying the canals. We looked at areas where people were complaining about property damage because of stormwater situation. So there are things about the canal, you know, we didn't talk about with you guys, but I met with some people at Clemson Extension back in February. And then talking to just some other people that have property along the Black River. Obviously, we know behind the condos at the end of Bragg's Ferry, you have the duck impoundment. So there's a huge recreational use for waterfront property. Those guys spend a lot of money remediating, they're building up dike walls, you know, enhancing their water control system. I think, you know, I think an assumption here, and you guys can tell me if you think it holds water, but if you had 5 or 6 duck impoundments that were doing major renovations to their water control, their dikes, you know, using drag lines to add water to build up their bunds and things like that, and this goes back to Clemson Extension alluded to, we're seeing a greater watershed along the river in South Carolina, and especially along the coast because of development. So does that make sense that, you know, maybe that's why we've seen some of the sediment deposit occur more rapidly because of whether it's residential development further upstream or whether it's more immediate to like recreational property, that, you know, the water was dirtier essentially and carrying more sediment with it.
This is definitely something that we thought about. So especially because I think one of the questions involved, it was like there was a long time where they didn't dredge canals and and the sediment didn't build up, and now it's kind of happening quicker, which a part of that probably is that there is upstream changes, and there's crazy development all over the place and along that river as well upstream. So it is likely that as more development gets built out, like there's tides, not the tides, but the flows are changing, the sediment coming in there's changing because there's different amounts of if there's construction going on. Yeah, you're right, they would be like disturbing sediment and that would be pulled in. There's no way to quantify that, but that is something that we took into account, that there's probably going to be changes more rapidly as more upstream development does happen.
I think increased frequency of storms or just the timing of storms can matter too. You know, if you get one big storm that disrupts a particular channel and releases a lot of sediment, then it's going to remain in the water for a while and increase the sedimentation that you see too. Okay. Let's jump through. We can certainly circle back to any of these, but let's try to get through all the questions just to make sure we're covering the breadth, and then we can dive in deeper too. So question 3 or 4. Lauren, we're on 3 here.
Yeah, we're on number 3.
Actually, I can share my screen and then show that to folks. Why don't I do that?
Yeah, that's probably, I should have the screen just so everyone has the questions available to see.
All right, looking at, this one, number 3 here.
Yeah, so how much improvement can dredging below low tide levels bring to the overall outflow and drainage efficiency? Trying to look at my notes. Which one? Quinn or David, I think y'all looked at this one more.
Yeah, so for this one, I would say that dredging below the low tide level would help, definitely, but you know, the effects of dredging would be limited based on like where the tides are at. Because you know, if they're high and the outflow pipe is at a certain elevation, it's not going to matter how deep the pipes are in terms of efficiency, but it definitely can help a little bit.
Yeah, quantifying that is difficult, but you're right, the tide makes all the difference. If the tide is high, then and the water is above the pipe level, then it's not going to matter much. But below that, yeah. Okay. This question about culverts, Lauren?
Yeah, so number 4 was, we mentioned that some of the culverts are too deep, yet there's no sediment deposits in the bottom radius of the pipes. So what are our concerns? So we were told and kind of shown a few areas when we came for the site visit back in, I believe, February, that there were pipes that sediment is getting built up in, specifically the ones that are feeding into the canals. And right at the outfall, you can see that where the sediment is building up above the lip of the pipe. So that was something that we noted during the site visit, and that we were told from a few community members. It's not all of the pipes, but it's also just good, like, general management practice to clean out your pipes every so often. And we did do some calculations that some of the pipes, the water might be flowing too slowly to clean out the sediment, because you kind of want a sweet spot of flow in your pipes where you want it to be kind of fast enough that it washes away the sediment that it's bringing with it. And some of those were a little too slow, specifically I believe the big ones. So those were our concerns with depth was that the ones specifically going into the canal were inundated with sediment at the bottom of them.
Can I get you to clear something up about that? Well, I did have a conversation and I've seen some comments. It's not that we're not directing enough drainage into those pipes for them to matter. It's the fact that it's not producing enough of a flow rate, correct? It's not about the amount of water that we actually use those pipes for. It's about the rate at which it's flowing out that keeps them clean, right? Hello?
Quinn, do you have a comment on that?
So the rate at which they flow at. Yeah, you're right, Adam.
Dan has a question.
Lauren, you said at the end of the pipe, the sediment is above the bottom of the ledge of the pipe. Would that kind of confirm that the sediment is coming in with the tides more than the pipe if it's above the pipe?
So that is part of what we were like, that we know that some of the sediment is coming in. We know that some of the sediment is coming in with the tides, and we assume that most of it is coming in from the tidal influences into that pipe, but there's no way to quantify how much is coming from the actual community and like the drainage from the community versus what's coming in. So we don't know for sure, like we can't definitively say, but we do know that some of it is coming from the tides. But if that...
Well, I just heard you say that it was above the lip of the pipe, the sediment. So if the drainage from the community would be going into the canals, gravity would take it down. So if it's above the lip, it has to be coming this way. That's all that's all I'm wondering. That makes sense.
Yeah. Now it's not always above the lip though, right? It goes up and down. That's important. We know that the overall flow, so like here, this pipe, for example, obviously the water is above the pipe right now, but is the water flowing into the pipe? Maybe a little bit, like when the tide is rising, there's going to be some flow into the pipe that could drop sediment. But the overall net flow of that pipe has got to be out. Otherwise, the community would never drain. So the net flow is coming out. So you do have sediment coming from the community coming out through this pipe as well. It's really coming in and out. That's the way it works.
Right. But I mean, we have a lot of sunny days down here. I understand this is storm drainage, but I'm just thinking the sediment. We're not contributing a lot to the community. It's more sediment from the Black River.
Yeah. No, that's right. It's both. And could be more Black River, yeah. Could be. All right. Let's see. 5 here? Lauren, are you?
Yeah, sorry. The train was going by, I muted myself. So if we no longer dredged all the canals, will dredging the 2 access points while still dredging, would this provide a means to ensure proper drainage from the plantation to the river? So again, the assumption is that over time, if you don't dredge the canals, they will eventually fill up with sediment. That number is not able to be pinpointed how long it would take right now. We are not able to do that number, but the assumption is that eventually the canals will fill with enough sediment that drainage is no longer possible. So the 2 access points, you would have to move your outfall to the access point. So right now your outfall is going into the canals, like the very end of them. So if you were to not dredge at all, eventually you would probably have to move your outfalls to the access point if you are going to dredge the access point.
Okay. Number 6.
Number 6. So if we no longer decided to dredge the canals, would the law of nature regarding water flow take over? So once high tides reach, flow will naturally go to other bodies of water. Excuse me. That's kind of a similar one, I believe, to number 6 or to number 5, that eventually, if you're not dredging the canals should fill up with sediment, and the water will eventually, like, water finds a way, no matter what. I mean, we all know that water will get in, water will get out. But having it flow naturally to other bodies of water. Right now, there's low points on the property that it would probably settle in before it's able to reach the river or any of the ponds. So while you do have like all those water hazards and ponds on the golf course, they wouldn't be enough to handle all the really big storms or like hurricanes. So yes, eventually the water would find its way to the river, but it would be slower and it would probably settle in places that you don't want it to settle first.
If I can throw in a concept here, Lauren, I'm going to share. This is just a satellite view of the Mississippi River area between Mississippi and Arkansas. And so the main course of the river is through here. And, you know, our society spends a lot of time and energy keeping the river channel where it is, because the natural course is to flow out to the right, flow out to the left. And that's how these oxbow lakes get formed. And you see that all up and down the Mississippi River, but you see it in the smaller rivers of South Carolina too. And so the natural way that rivers and flows progress is they fill up with sediment, and then the water gets diverted in to the side, and then that forms a channel, and then that'll fill up after a while, and the water will flow back. So in other words, if we were to let it to go to nature, I think it would just be flooding different people's homes over different years. Now, these oxbow lakes, this is millennia, right? This is like hundreds of years, thousands of years that this occurs. But over decades, you would see just this sort of natural meandering of the river. I think to keep the water flowing where you want it to flow, yeah, you gotta dredge it out to keep the water. Make sure the low point is always the low point. That's the story. Okay. Oh, I can't scroll down anymore. We're at the bottom. So 7. Go ahead, Lauren.
I think Quinn is gonna take this one.
Yeah, so this question is asking if dredging is necessary, what depth and frequency would be required. And like I said earlier, any recommendations on the frequency of dredging would be an estimate. Like we're basing this on historic numbers. I know normally they take like 10 to 15 years between dredging cycles. But that number is likely increasing with the amount of storms and the increase in sea level. So, you know, it's 10 to 15 now, but, you know, it could be 10 in the future. And as far as depth goes, I know in our presentation we outlined the depths. David, did you have what depths we were looking for the canals and dredging them?
Yeah, so as far as depth, it's kind of hard because I did look back at some of the bid documents that y'all received for the previous contract, and I could tell that there were like certain parts of the inlets that were going to be like dredged to one depth, and then the canals themselves were going to be dredged to another depth. So it was kind of hard to and we also don't know the current depth of the canal either. Like that's another like measurement that we would have to have, and we would have to have a lot of different like data points for because obviously the whole system is not going to be like one depth. It's going to like naturally like increase and decrease. So as far as like the actual depth, we didn't really like do any research into that because it was just like what was in those documents, but we did do like different calculations for the amount of sediment that needed to be removed based off of like assuming if the entire canal was like at this depth and we wanted to dredge to this depth. Yeah, that's what that table is. So that's just like assuming that the whole canal system is at one certain depth and we want to dredge to either like -6 or -8, like feet below like the mean low water. But yeah, we didn't really like do anything other than that.
Okay. Walk us through this table. What does this mean exactly? You have dredge elevation here and elevation of the current canal bed. So it's kind of saying, yeah, tell us what the axes are on your table.
Yeah, so the basically what it means is like the x-axis is like the assumed elevation of the canal bed because we don't know it. So like that first column is going to be like, for example, if that would be a situation where the canals are like fully like not like closed, but like the base of the canal was at like mean low water, and we were going to dredge to like -6. So that means like 6 feet below that. And then that amount, the 173,000 cubic yards, is the amount of sediment that would need to be removed to achieve that. And then the associated cost with the removal. And then I have that like spreading out throughout the table for like different assumed like bed levels of the canal and then where we would dredge to.
Okay. Yeah, hopefully that kind of makes sense. And I think this is a good way to do it because there's also variability along the length of the canal. Now, David, you did mention the mobilization. I think this is the key thing is that there's a certain cost per yard of material, and you found 1563 from 4 different references. Is that what this means? Okay, so that's the average cost to remove. But does that include the mobilization permit and permitting?
So in all the documents that I looked at, they had it kind of like itemized, and it was like there was like a base price for removal, and then there was also like mobilization, demobilization, like a line item for that, and then like there was sometimes a line item for permitting. So it really does like that's another source of like not really like error, just like uncertainty because we don't really know like what that like price is going to like involve just based off of like the source that we got it from because that's going to be like per company, you know, like how they like break down their cost of removal because some companies do just like pile it all in as one and charge it that way, but the way that I did it was just like just for the bulk removal and then like not including the mobilization and permitting and all that.
Okay. Yeah, so I think the story is though that mobilization and permitting are one lump sum just to get started. So then you want to remove as much material as you can while you're under that one mobilization and permitting umbrella. Because if you do it every year, then you're going to have to repay the mobilization and permitting costs every time you do the dredging. So there's got to be some kind of sweet spot where you're only dredging once every few years. You want to extend it as long as you can to make it worth your buck, I think. But then, of course, the canals are going to fill up a lot during that time. Okay. Let's go to 8 there.
So number
question, I guess, huh?
Yeah, 8. So I kind of touched on this, or I don't remember which question, and we kind of brought it up with. I think it was when Adam was speaking about where like sediment is coming in with like upstream development and stuff. So the longest recording time that y'all have not dredged the canals was 28 years, but that was back in the 80s and 90s, and there was no drainage problems recorded. So can we commonly say that dredging of our canals is an absolute necessity for drainage? So during that time period, right now, there's just no way to tell because there was so much upstream development during that time and development within your neighborhood as well. So kind of how we mentioned before that when build out occurs, places where water used to just kind of settle and it wasn't an issue because no one was using those lots. Now those lots are full, so now there's more drainage problems noted within the community, and there was upstream development, so that was changing the amount of sediment that was probably coming in, as well as how the river moves probably might have changed over that time period. So there's no way for us to kind of compare to that time period because so much has changed with the flow during that time period. The water will always find its way out, but it won't be as efficient probably if you're not dredging the canals.
Yeah, was there a slide that showed the development? I thought there was somewhere.
I don't think we had ones. We might have had it in the appendix, but I think we just talked about it. I don't know if we had like an actual figure that showed. We had one that showed it was the one in the beginning. Actually, David or Dr. Ladner, in the very beginning, we did show like before and after. Yeah,
This one, right?
yes.
So this
And
one
this
is a
was
little hard to see though. Walk us through what we're looking at.
so, and this wasn't even like that time period that you didn't dredge was 82 to 2010. And this is the first photo is from 2015. So, like specifically in that kind of upper left hand area, I don't remember what road that's called. There was a lot of development there
So the
specifically.
road, I think the road is here.
Yeah.
You can see all the woods around it. And now that road is here, but it's all homes, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's something we can see. And just in general, I think there was a lot more wooded area in 2015 compared to 2024. Now we see a lot more sort of yards and just homes. Yes, so I think you're right, Lauren. It's hard to say much except that development does increase the amount of exposed dirt that can run off. Okay. And you earlier, Lauren, you mentioned that even upstream, so even if the water's coming in from the canals, you know, there could be impacts along the coast that are causing more sediment to be released, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the last one, number 9.
As far as like alternatives to dredging, I don't think we really looked into anything because I don't, as far as like I know, I don't believe there is any other type of like alternative to dredging that would be effective. Also, there's also just the fact that dredging in itself is like permitted and you have to like follow certain regulations and like laws for not just like the practice of dredging, but like the disposal of the material. So there's also like the fact that like no matter what happens, you have to either stop that material from coming in or somehow get it back out, like clear it out. So really like the best and only way to do that would be dredging. Because then if you're talking about like something like a turbidity curtain or something like in the water, that would have to be like a long-term thing, but that would also like completely stop like boats from being able to use like any of that like waterway too, because there would be like a physical boundary like in the water. But that's kind of like the only alternative, but we really didn't do any type of studying or like analysis to see like the long-term effects of that.
That is interesting, though, turbidity curtain. So could that be something they could look into to do more, look into it further? Or do you think it's just not like what did you read about turbidity curtains?
The only thing that I saw with turbidity curtains is like in the process of dredging, you have to install them around the area that's being dredged, kind of like upstream and downstream, because when you're dredging, you're kicking up that sediment like back up into the water, especially if you're trying to contain like contaminated sediment. I know this isn't the case here, but if there was some sort of like chemical contaminant in the sediment that they're dredging out, you want to be able to contain it in one area. So the turbidity curtain is what keeps like that resuspended sediment like in one area. But that's the only like I guess like knowledge that I gained off of it. I didn't do any specific research into like a turbidity curtain itself. I just like read about it in dredging.
Oh, okay. So yeah, just implemented during dredging. You didn't see instances of them being installed like long term to prevent sediment, natural sediment coming in. Okay. I see some things in the chat. Can someone share the link to the report? Yeah, we can do that.
I did.
Oh, you did already. Okay.
Emma sent the report along too. And then in section 5.22 regarding the green-gray infrastructure, could you comment on the importance of ongoing maintenance of existing ditches, such as figure 9? Yeah, let's go take a look at figure 9. See if we can find it.
And also the report is going to be on our website, will be on our website.
Yeah, tell us more about figure 9 and what we're trying to say there.
Yeah, so I didn't see that question. That's my bad. Can you just repeat what it was? I can't see it.
It's in the meeting. Oh, no, it's to me a direct question, I see. Or direct message. Additional question in section 5.22 regarding, there he has it to everyone. Thank you, Chris. Regarding green-gray infrastructure, could you comment on the importance of ongoing maintenance of existing ditches?
Yeah, so I know the canals are kind of like the big point that a lot of these questions are residing on, and they're kind of a really important area of the aspect of the drainage, but we did also look into, so just general good maintenance of any drainage system is really important, just making sure it stays working. And this area specifically was one of the ones that was pointed out to us, and it was pretty clear that it needed probably some extra reinforcements. This is that area right going into the canal before it goes under the road. I think it's the most westest canal, the one all the way on the end, I believe. So this ditch, we were told that it had been, it gets filled up with like debris such as like tree limbs, branches, leaves, etc. during big storm events. And the owner who owns the property directly to the left of where this photo is noted that it basically kind of overtops. So that was one of the areas that we were like, you could possibly reinforce that with like riprap to prevent it from eroding anymore, and possibly implement, they already put in that kind of jerry-rig device to prevent that debris from getting into the canal. So we were noticing that at that specific ditch, you might want to possibly reinforce it so that it can just handle it better, and it won't build up as much if you use kind of some riprap is kind of the idea, and just general making sure stuff is cleaned out. So yeah, that was our thought process with that figure.
I have a question regarding that. This was from a community member. You have dredging as one option, the dredging, and infrastructure, like ditches, as you were just speaking, and pipes. Is one of these way different than the other? Should one be done before the other? Or which is one more important than the other?
I did not. That was a little blurry on my end. So
I think I heard which is more important, like which ditches are most important to kind of clear first. Is that the nature of the question?
The question was, dredging is one option for drainage, and infrastructure, clearing our ditches, replacing pipes that have over the years deteriorated, is one weighted more than the other, is one more important than the other, or should one be done before the other?
like what would be more important, what needs to be done more urgently of the two options? I think Quinn or David, did y'all have any input on that one?
Oh yeah, I would say that I mean, obviously it's a two-part system. It's not that one is necessarily more important than the other. Because you know, if you're not getting the water off of your guys' site, it is gonna just pile up over time. And especially with getting these storms in, and you know, we'll have a frequent 1 or 2 year. I mean, we had one this week. And over time, your infrastructure is going to get more and more inundated. And by the time that hurricane season comes by, you guys are going to get a big storm, and all your infrastructure is already going to be full. So, I would say, just in short, it's a two-part system. Um, I personally think that cleaning out the infrastructure, um, looking at it like that, would be a better idea, because you're not just looking at the canals, or um, you're not looking at one specific solution. Whereas you're looking at the system as a whole, and looking at what you guys need to do to prevent flooding or at least mitigate it. Um, so yeah, I just think looking at the whole system, and I know we outlined to the solutions as separate things, but in reality, they both do kind of play hand in hand. So um, yeah.
I think it's kind of a matter of like urgent versus important. So obviously the dredging of the canals is a very big key, like it's important, but it's not as urgent. Like it's going to take a lot of time for it to build up. And I know it has, because you haven't, it's been several years since you've last dredged, but I more to see the like management of your existing infrastructure is kind of a more urgent thing, where it's something that's not going to require a lot of comparatively like money and effort, but it's something that's definitely going to help a lot in the short term. And like you're having problems now, so even if you do decide to go ahead and dredge, you're going to have to wait while you're getting that contract done, while they're doing the dredging. And during that time period, it would probably be a good idea to start looking at your current infrastructure and, okay, this ditch is getting a lot of like leaves and kind of stuff getting built up in it. We should probably reinforce this one first now while we have time. And just small scale stuff like that would probably be good in the short term while you're still trying to do larger, possibly canal dredging later on.
I'll throw in there an idea too, that I think you essentially need a perpetual business plan for it, where you're going to have to clear out ditches, annually, or at least some of the ditches annually, and then you're going to have to do dredging once every 5 to 10 years. And so the finances side of that too, you should be building up your funds every year in preparation for the dredging that will happen every 5 years, building up the funds every year for the ditch clearing that'll happen every year or every 2 years, something like that. Yeah, thinking of the long term, not a once and done kind of plan. All right.
I have a question, and it's, I guess, about some of maybe the methodologies that you use for determining existing infrastructure. So obviously we have a menagerie of drainage maps. The original developers had a certain amount of infrastructure that they installed over the years. I understand the HOA went and remediated some of that. They installed pipes in certain places. Some of those you have a picture of, they were the metal pipes that pretty much fail over time because they either collapse or they rust or they get penetrated by roots. And then some of our stormwater is actually owned or was installed by the county. For like me, over drainage, what is your best resource, or for locating, like what would be my next step if I was trying to really track down existing infrastructure here, and I'm not getting it from the maps? Like,
yeah,
how much are you using GIS, or is there another source that can sort of show me some of this underground stuff that we don't see?
Is Emma still on? Emma, I think would you be able to comment on this?
Yeah, so a lot of the data we did get was from the existing PDFs and kind of plans that were shown to us. But I know through LiDAR detection and like high resolution LiDAR, you can get culvert points and know like those elevations. I'm not really sure in terms of like other infrastructure, how to go about identifying those.
What I would say is, especially with neighborhoods that go back or just anything, because I used to work at a wastewater treatment plant and we had a lot of issues with this where they've done so much construction over time that the maps don't really kind of line up, or like someone forgot to mention something when they were putting in the as-built. Um, so what I would probably personally suggest is that you can get a surveyor to come and do like what is it? GPR ground, I think it's ground penetrating radar, where they just sense kind of what's underground. So normally that's used to see like utility lines. I know we've done that at certain plants to see like where we have our utility lines, but I believe you can also do it with pipes. I don't know. We didn't look into the cost of that, of what it would cost to have a survey group come out and basically use ground penetrating radar where we believe the pipes are and have them follow it. But that is probably, if you want a complete map of what you have now, that would probably be your best bet, to have someone come and do that type of use that type of technology to find what's underground.
Okay. There's a comment in the chat here. Cleaning out the interior ditches is critical, especially given the high rainfall events we now have. More of a priority is to stop people from filling the ditches to mitigate flooding starting to happen due to dumping debris in ditches. This didn't happen 5 to 10 years ago. Okay, so that's more of a comment than a question. But yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Any other thoughts, questions?
We've had some people make comments, and we have an email that talks about, like the HOA, does the HOA have any plans to increase the elevation or berms to construct barriers that will eliminate flooding in certain areas? This question is actually not related directly to the townhouses we looked at that neighbor the duck impoundment. This is another area of the neighborhood that does border an old rice field. What's your opinion on the effectiveness? Like, is it even feasible? Do we even have an option to build any sort of structure?
David, this one's kind of yours.
Yeah, so we did kind of talk about like building some sort of berm, or like reestablishing the one that was in that corner of the property by the duck ponds. The only thing that like we kind of thought about was that's going to stop like you would have to have some sort of check valves in place, because while it would keep out like some of that coastal water, if there was any type of like heavy rain event or like a flood event, then it's going to keep that flood water in, like on the property side of the berm, not like the duck pond, like rice field side. So we did think about that and we did propose that earlier. But again, we'd have to have some sort of check valve in place to like control which way the water flows, because you would want to like stop the water from like flowing in, but you would also like want it to be open for water to flow out. But then it also like wouldn't really be as effective if there was like, for example, a king tide and there was a lot of rain like during a hurricane, because then like even if you were trying to like open a check valve, like the water's going to be rising on both sides of the berm. So we did kind of discuss it, but we kind of determined that it wouldn't necessarily be like the best option to pursue.
Okay. Yeah, I'll comment there too that one of your residents built his own berms around his house, and I think it is effective there for him. Of course, he spent a lot of money and time building it. And the other key thing, David alluded to this again, is just the maintenance. I mean, he's physically monitoring the system when there's a storm event to make sure that his sump pumps are pumping water out, to make sure that the caps are in place on the pipes so the water isn't allowed to come in, and those kinds of things. And I will say that Vince Morabit, he sent an email to me too, and he was commenting on the fact that
for very big storms where the water level is just higher than everything, well, of course, there's nothing you can do in that case, right? Everything is going to be flooded unless you were to build a dike around the entire HOA, which is going to be prohibitively expensive. But then in the smaller storms, where the water level doesn't reach that high, sometimes the water isn't even coming from the duck marsh or essentially onto the property. It's really coming from elsewhere in the property and flowing down into that area. So it is complex. I think for each location, you kind of got to pay very close attention to the elevations and come up with a plan for that location. Okay. I don't know. Did that address your comment or question at all, or are we thinking about something different?
Yeah, I mean, that gives me an idea. And this specific question came from a person that lives on the other side of the neighborhood.
Okay. Sorry, there was some background noise. Go ahead.
And ironically enough, the two roads that he brought up are called Ricefield and Duck Pond. So while we're talking about Rags Ferry, we're using the same words, but this question was related to a different area. And it's directly affected by, I guess, canal waters that come in next to our marina. So where, by the townhouses where we visited, there used to be a berm, right, where we established there's that tree line that was out in the water, sort of, with mature trees. So we knew there used to be a high ground structure there at one point, and reestablishing that could be feasible. This particular area that this question related to is an area it's pretty much, we'll call it the coastline of the neighborhood, right? It's the furthest out. It's the closest to the river. So it would be different. There wasn't like a high ground structure that used to exist there. It's actually more of a true waterfront, I guess.
And so they were wondering about the feasibility of building something there.
Well, they have water events there that they didn't used to have. And so, and so now and some of that is also related back to my very first question, where people talk about water backing up into stormwater drainage during high tides. This is that same area, and it's not to just be nonchalant about it at all, because obviously it's a place people are suffering right now, but is it one of those? It might be one of those where we just it's become a problematic area because of maybe watershed further. We're dealing with different water levels than we were 10, 15, 20 years ago. And it's not, this is just a very hyper-specific question, and it does deserve some attention, but you guys probably don't have any, we don't have any data to show you what we're talking about here. But just, I guess my general question from that question is berm or some sort of barrier, wall, whatever, is that a feasible solution? I mean, I don't know that we have an opportunity to build one long continuous structure, but similar to the house on Rags Ferry that had the dike around his own yard.
I think anything can be built, and then it's just the cost of building it. But a key thing is also the attention to the operation of the system, essentially. Like the house on Rags Ferry, that owner is really an operator of a semi-complex stormwater management system. And so I think that is super important. If you build something that's intended to keep water out, you just have to realize it's going to require maintenance and operation. It's going to have to be somebody's baby, essentially, to pay attention to it and make sure it's functioning correctly. Right. Well, I do want to say too that, well, one, thank you for giving us the opportunity to work on this. Two, I think we said in the beginning that we knew it was sort of a preliminary study. Um, I do wish we could have given you more, solid answers, but I think we collected the data that were available. I think these maps and whatnot are useful. And if you had someone that was able to use ArcGIS or contractor or something, we can get you. Emma especially collected a lot of the data that could help for things like locating infrastructure and whatnot. So I think it could be the basis for figuring out some actionable items. I don't know that we've given you very clear actionable items yet, but I hope that it's a step in the right direction.
I just have a few other questions, which I think we've probably already answered,
Yeah, go
but
ahead.
homeowners have sent them in, so I want to make sure that we go on record that we do ask their questions so that they get an answer.
Yes,
this one is
do it.
also from the same gentleman that questioned about the berms. What areas of the plantation, other than those two streets, Rice Field and Duck Pond, where Adam was speaking, what other areas of the plantation are affected by flooding during storm situations and extreme high tides, according to your study?
Emma, do you have any comments on that?
With the FEMA map, we noticed that even throughout the middle of the neighborhood with the 100-year storm, there was inundation just throughout the center. So it was not really just about this bordering houses, but also kind of through that area through Mansfield, there was some effects coming through, even at higher elevations.
Is that this map here, Emma, or something else?
No, I don't know which, it's like the purple.
Was it on the presentation?
Yeah, it was. It was in the beginning. Yeah, here.
Okay. So yeah, so what you're saying is, let's see. Well, tell us about this map. What is it showing us?
So this is for the 500-year storm and then the 100-year storm with 1% and 0.2% annual chance of flooding. So it kind of just shows with different higher frequency storms, that a majority of the neighborhood is affected, not even just on the canals or near those duck ponds.
So you're kind of saying this part back in here was the surprising part to you?
Yeah, and that's where a lot of the water flows back into Mansfield that goes back into the canals.
It goes back into the canals?
Yeah, it goes from this area into Mansfield and then, yeah.
Oh, into Mansfield and then back down this way?
Yeah.
Okay.
And this gentleman's other question was, how will dredging the canal bottoms improve drainage during severe weather and or high tides?
I can make a comment and see if the students agree, but yeah, during the severe weather and high tides, if we're thinking hurricanes or similar large storms where the tide just rises above the normal water levels, then of course, that really is not going to be affected by dredging the canals, unfortunately. It could affect the speed with which the water leaves after the flood, but no, essentially if the flooding is too high, then it's not going to matter how much sediment is in the canal.
And then we have, I'm sorry.
Sorry. Okay. So I'll just say that in general, dredging pretty much just serves to remove the sediment from the canals, which increases their capacity, and it also increases the ability of the canals to store and convey the water. So this will help like maintain the water levels that David was talking about. And especially when like the sediment builds up and gets to heights near the that canal outflow invert, that creates like kind of a resistance effect in terms of like gravity because the water is not flowing from your guys' site anymore and it's actually flowing back onto it. Um, so just in general, like it just helps to store more water. Dredging helps to store more water as well as increase the capacity for flow.
That makes sense.
Okay, another question, this is from another owner, has 3 questions. Are the storm drains affected by the canals?
The storm drains impacted by the canals? Was that
Yes.
Specifically, not all of them are. Like obviously the any of the like storm drains that are on the opposite side, like near Mansfield or near the entrance, those aren't going to be impacted. But the ones we're most concerned about are like specifically those few that kind of go under the road and then feed into the canals. Those are impacted by the canals. They're impacted by the high tide. They're impacted by the sediment that gets pulled in. And that's where your outfall is. And that's why we're kind of worried, not worried, but like that's why we're focused on like those more than we are on like other drain pipes. It's because those ones are where it's all coming out of, or at least a significant amount. So we're most concerned about making sure that those are like taken care of.
Yeah.
Okay, the next.
Real quick, actually, if I could have Quinn kind of comment on this section of the report a little bit, I think it's supporting what he was saying a minute ago. But one of the things they did was to calculate this peak discharge. Like, what's the water flow when you have different storm events? And they characterize it as a 2-year storm, a 10-year storm, 25-year, 100-year. It's just a bigger storm with each, increasing size a year. And these water flows. So is this what you're saying, Quinn, that like these 1,000 cubic feet per second, 2,000 cubic feet per second, 3,000, 4,000, like dredging the canals, like helps alleviate or remove that water flow?
Yeah, I would say that it helps to handle it. So this number here isn't necessarily incorporating the drainage infrastructure, but this is just more of a like for 100-year storm, how much flow are we going to see on the site? It's not necessarily incorporating the infrastructure into it.
Okay, right. But it is taking into account the area, right?
Yeah, so the total
drainage area.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah, and I know those numbers don't mean so much to an average person, or even to me. I don't know what to do with those numbers necessarily, except just to notice that the water flows are pretty high, and so we want a clear drainage system to allow those flows to leave. All right, Marilyn, back to you.
Okay, yes. Our next question is, are the canals in need of maintenance due to the drainage system that we have in Wedgefield Plantation? And I believe you basically answered that.
Okay.
So our final question is, will the drainage system back up if the canals are not maintained?
I think that kind of goes back to the assumption that if you don't dredge the canals, eventually they will fill up. That's just kind of what we're just kind of assuming that that's going to happen, that if you don't dredge the canals and the tides keep bringing in silt over the years, that eventually they will fill up, and that will close basically the outfalls that go into the canals. So yes, eventually it would impact and probably back up the system if the sediment gets high enough that the water can't flow out of those pipes anymore.
But you really have no, you really can't tell how long that would take.
Telling how long it would take for that to happen would involve really advanced modeling that we either could not do or did not have access to do, because you're going to have to do advanced hydraulic modeling to do flow coming both in and out of the canals, and then you're going to have to do the advanced sediment transport modeling. And there's a few like different ways you can do that, but both of them would involve measurements over a period of time and software modeling, and like especially with the added tidal influences, it's going to take a lot of modeling that even then it might not be 100% accurate to tell how long it's going to take for that sediment to build up. And it might build up faster in one canal than the others. So telling how long is, we were not able to do that.
Yeah, no, I certainly understand that. Does anyone else have any questions? Any other questions?
We do have two questions in the chat. I can kind of read them out just so that we could get to them. One of them was asked, it said that it has been stated by Georgetown County Stormwater Management that our system is so outdated that it will cost over $1 million to fix. Should this be a priority over dredging? I think that's kind of like a two-pronged thing where kind of, I don't remember if it was David or Quinn, but your canals are part of the system. Like, even though they're technically, like, they're not the pipes, they're not the outfalls, they're not the culverts, they're still an active part of the drainage system. So kind of going back to that, like, urgent versus important, like, it is important to work on the canals and make sure that they can still take in that flow, but completely overhauling the system, it's hard to say if that should be a priority. Certainly, like, certain areas, yes, you might want to focus on those, but priority over dredging is kind of hard to tell, especially like long-term versus short-term, when flooding is only kind of going to get worse as like the upstream kind of keeps changing, and if sea level continues to rise and storms continue to get worse, it's going to be hard to tell how bad they're going to get before it needs to be dredged again or before the system needs to be completely overhauled. And if Quinn or David or Dr. Ladner had anything to add to that one as well. Sorry about the train.
No, I agree with what you're saying. I do think, I think it's great that Georgetown County Stormwater Management has weighed in on it. And, you know, a close collaboration with them would be beneficial to figuring out exact next steps to take.
And then if there's nothing else to add on that one, the second question was kind of a side question, that are there any benefits to continuous flow in a ditch versus just only flow in a ditch during like stormwater events? So for example, figure 9, that ditch that we showed now has continual flow from a golf course. Is that kind of good or bad? I think, Quinn, this feels like kind of a civil, if you've got anything to input into that one, that might be helpful.
Yeah, so the only thing I would say for the continual flow for ditches would be regarding that self-cleansing velocity. So I think in general, when you have a ditch that has flow running through it, you know, it prevents some of that sediment buildup, and also just I think it just confirms your drainage infrastructure is working. But besides that, I don't know of any other benefits to continual flow.
I'll throw in another question here that that Chris Rosen sent to me. Does it benefit your program or students to try to find a grant for a long-term study of the area? Is it a good candidate for any sort of state or federal grants to study further? I think yes, or it would definitely benefit us. I think this has been a good learning opportunity, and other students could benefit with a deeper dive type of study. I think for state and federal grants, it's a little bit harder to make the case to study a specific area for like one community. If we could broaden the scope to a study of, general stormwater dynamics that would affect anywhere along the coast with Wedgefield as a case study part of a larger overall kind of research design program, I think that could work. So I will be thinking about that. This is always, every project is a stepping stone toward a future project. So we'll see what we can put together. All right. Any other thoughts?
For all the time, the students.
Yes, thank you so much. It has been extremely helpful to us, it really has. And we hope that perhaps a future class would be interested in coming back again and extending some of this work.
Okay.
Congrats to all the seniors.
Yes, congratulations to you all.
Thank
And thank
you.
you again, you've done an outstanding job for us and we appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, we sorry we couldn't get you more concrete stuff, but hopefully this is kind of a good step-in point for y'all to move forward and kind of look at what really needs to get done next. So appreciate the chance to look into it.
Yes, there was just a question that popped up. Did you see it?
Yeah. Are the canals in need of immediate dredging, Wedgefield, based on what you've witnessed thus far, or in your estimation, could we do basic maintenance for 3 to 5 years? I don't know. Do you any students have a comment there?
David?
Yeah, as far as like a current need, we didn't like we were only there for like a short-term time, and as far as like our observations of the canals, I think both were when the tide was like pretty high, so we weren't able to see like what it looks like at low tide, so we don't know currently like the state of the canals, and that would also take like we said kind of previously, like that would take more time and measurements to see like what areas of the canals are in more like critical need of maintenance or dredging. Because that's also another thing. Like some portions of the canals might need dredging, some don't, because I'm sure there's some sections that experience more like deposition of that sediment. But currently, where we stand, we don't know kind of the status of those canals.
Yeah, and I would just add, you guys got your canals dredged last in 2018, right?
Yes.
That's not, yeah.
Yes.
So, I would say, I think a general practice is to dredge at a not a frequent rate, but a planned cycle that you guys do. But I mean, you guys just dredged in 2018, and like I said, that 10 to 15 years is like the normal dredging cycle for most coastal communities in your area. But every system is very different, and you guys could be getting a much larger sediment load than other communities. So you guys may have to dredge more frequently or less frequently, depending on maybe like future studies into the sediment load that is contributing to the canal sediment accumulation.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I also think, the obviously the folks that have boats on the canal, they notice when at low tide they're not able to get out or whatever. And of course, for the rest of the community, that's not the main priority. but it is kind of a red herring or a harbinger of things to come, sort of. It is important to recognize that the system was designed with the ditches and whatnot of the main community and the canals open and free. So essentially, like, maintaining that is kind of best practice, maintaining the way it was originally designed. Um, if you're going to consider allowing the canals to fill up further, then you're essentially like creating a new design of a new drainage system, which is complex and different. So I think just best practice, for the homeowners and whatnot, is to keep the canals maintained, and then of course it's up to you all if you want to change that design and go through that process. All right.
Nothing more from our end, except to thank you again very much, and thank you for having this session with us. It's been very productive and helpful.
Awesome. No, this has been a great experience for us, so we appreciate it. We appreciate the opportunity to collaborate. And we'll certainly be in touch. So,
Yes,
yeah.
Thank
The
you.
students are graduating, but I'm not going anywhere. I won't graduate for another 15 years. So we'll be in touch.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah, later.
Wow. Yeah.